Let's move along then. Speaking of those of you who chose to watch college football this weekend, our beloved Notre Dame had their first game of the season, um, winning against Duke. If you didn't know, Jared, let's start with you. What did you think of Notre Dame's opening performance this year?
It was obviously a mixed bag. There was a ton of rust, and the offense took a while to get warmed up. I think Ian Book was nervous. I think there was a lot of nerves there. He underthrew slash short hopped a lot of his receivers, especially really early in the game. I think he kind of settled into the game and let it fly, which is why you saw him throw interceptions as well. But he let it fly a little bit. I don't think the game showed how good Book can be this year, though. I know I did worry about Brian Kelly's track record with a second-year quarterback. A lot of times, especially with Deshaun Kaiser and Brandon Wimbush, defenses either figure that quarterback out, and their second season is really bad. It happened with Kaiser and Wimbush for sure. Ian Book didn't have the same slump, which is why I think Book is different. But I worry. I hope that defenses haven't figured him out. So we'll see about that. I was really happy with how Kyron Williams played. He was giving me strong Dexter Williams vibes, which I really appreciate on this show. I was really impressed with the secondary as well. It was really good to see Sean Crawford out there in his, I believe, fifth year. He always gets hurt. He probably will get hurt at some point this year too, to be honest. But it was really good to see him out there, and he was playing really well as Kyle Hamilton, obviously. And it looks like his ankle's gonna be fine. So I was pretty happy with that. All the usual suspects basically played pretty well. The two things I was worried about. Our D line was a little sketchy. The Duke's offense got to the second level like early and often, which I was a little worried about. So we'll see how that plays out. We don't have the big names on there like Jerry Tillery from a couple years ago, and Okwara. We also need more production out of our wide receivers in terms of getting open. I'm worried about, obviously we lost Chase Claypool, our big guy. I'm definitely worried about that, but we're getting Braden Lindsey back pretty soon, so we will see.
Yeah, I was pretty worried just coming into the season with the wide receiving core, given that we lost Chase, we lost Cole Kmet, we lost Chris Fink in terms of targets for Book. So like that's pretty significant. So I think it makes sense that it might take a little while for the new set of targets to kind of come in and figure it out. So
yeah.
We'll see.
And one thing too, just real quick, that's interesting about like losing Komet is we also lost Chip Long, and he was the tight ends coach, so he loved to go to the tight ends a lot. And so I wonder how much are the tight ends going to feature in our offense going forward. That's another question mark. We'll see.
Yeah, in many ways, I feel like it felt like the same team that's played the last 4 years at this point, in which they win games. Like they find ways to like eke out wins, but it's never done in what feels like an overly impressive fashion. Like you might have a couple guys who have standout performances, like Kyron Williams this weekend looked incredible. I think has the potential to be one of the best running backs they've had come out in a while. I thought, like Jared said, the defense was good, and I think once the wide receiver class sort of settles in, Lindsey comes back, I think there's like potential for speed there. But I don't know. It doesn't feel like they ever are making that leap. Like they're never convincingly beating teams they should be, and they always manage to stay close in games, whether they should or not, in like both directions. Like I feel like Notre Dame rarely, if ever, plays in blowout games. Like I guess last year when they lost to Michigan, the playoff loss to Clemson a few years back, and I think that speaks to both Brian Kelly's strengths and weaknesses as a coach, in that he has them do a good job of treating every opponent sort of the same. And that helps because they play up in big games, even if they sometimes fall short. But it doesn't really pay off, I feel like, in these games against like Duke, where they muddled to a 27-13 victory. Book is a mixed bag. I don't know. It just doesn't feel convincing, and like they're ever really going to make the next step. That being said, I think they were also sort of held back by their offensive play calling. I don't think Tom Reese, as we're calling him now, was particularly impressive as a play caller, especially in the first couple quarters, which is like first down run, second down run, in a third and long situation, and sometimes Book would make the play and sometimes it wasn't, and it just felt predictable. He mixed it up a little bit in the second half, and that's when they sort of pulled away, but I didn't think there was anything to really keep the defense off balance. It was a very predictable sort of string of plays, and they would occasionally bust a big one, especially with Kyron Williams.
Yeah,
so I agree that this.
Go ahead, Bart.
Go ahead, Jared.
No, you go.
I was gonna say, okay, I do agree that this kind of reinforces the stereotype where we tend to like play down or up to opponents, right? You would have liked to see us win by more, but I also think, like Jared mentioned earlier, the whole thing about how this was the first game and there was a ton of rust. I mean, there was no spring training this year, right? These guys haven't played since winter of last year. I think that can be the reasoning for a lot of the issues that we saw.
Yeah.
I'm gonna allude back to that when talking about the NFL as well. But yeah, I just think, like, for the first half the team looked pretty miserable, but then like even by the second half they had picked it up and looked a lot better. I do think that you we need to be careful not to overreact, and kind of wait a couple more weeks I think before drawing conclusions about like whether Book is going to be just decent this year, so on and so forth.
Yeah. And Lucas, you kind of alluded to this, but what's kind of frustrating is that it'll be hard to like measure how good this team is until like the end of the season, because the hardest games are in November. They're playing Clemson in November. They're playing UNC in November. I think those are their toughest games. And that doesn't mean they're not going to have trouble with games the next couple months. Like the Notre Dame I know will, but it's going to be hard to like gauge them against like a seriously good team until we get to probably the Clemson game. I mean, Pitt looks pretty good. I think they're playing them in October, but that's about it. So we have a little bit of waiting to do.
Yeah, and I think in terms of asking, can Notre Dame beat Clemson? I don't think Clemson looked that unstoppable. Like everybody was like, their defense for sure was stout, but so was ours. I mean, it was we both let up 13 points. Granted, Clemson's all came in the fourth quarter, all but 3, I think. But I think, like you said, Bart, with the rust, it's going to favor defenses, I think, because your job is simpler in some ways. And I'm not going to say that that Clemson is already like en route to an ACC championship parade like everybody else is saying. We just haven't seen enough.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think I still have Clemson as a slight favorite to win the ACC over the field, but I don't think Notre Dame is completely out of the running either. Like, I think they're a good enough football team that on their day they could stay close and beat Clemson. Yeah. But I wasn't also convinced after watching that Duke game that, like, wow, like, I definitely think they're going to win the ACC either. It didn't really, I feel like, alter my opinion of how the season would turn out.
Yeah. I think we'll gain momentum, for sure. Like, I think we did our year 2018. We gained a ton of momentum. We started off, like, kind of shaky against Michigan. Then we keep going on, crush Stanford that year. You know what I mean? I think we'll see if we gain some momentum or not, and that'll be a good indicator. But, yeah.